Hello viewers, welcome to the lecture. Today we are going to see a lecture on the course Basic Civil and Mechanical Engineering. So this lecture is a continuation of the previous lecture on manufacturing process. This lecture I am going to cover an example of manufacturing process, that is forming. So I will be elaborating what are all the different forming process and examples of the forming process. Then we will move on to the foundry, the steps in foundry, and so on. Let us move into the slides. So the next thing, let us move on to the example of a manufacturing process. So here you can see forming, right? Forming is a one of the best example of the manufacturing process. So because in farming you can see day-to-day life we are having different applications, right? The first application about the farming I will tell you. You can see here. So these are the different classifications of metal forming process. You can see rolling, forging, extrusion, and drawing. So first is rolling. So what do you mean by rolling? The rolling is nothing but introduction of the material in between the two rollers. Why it is used? Because in order to reduce the diameter of the shaft or reduce the thickness of the material is allowed to flow in between the two rollers. So you can see the animation of the roller. Yes. So you can see here the blue color substance, right? That is a raw material is flown in between the material. That is a roller, right? So what happens to the material? The thickness is reduced. The next process is nothing but the forging. You can see here. So the material is placed in between the dies and an external force is applied. So what happens? The material will obtain the shape of the die. So this is what the example of the forging. So here the main application is about the creation of the finished product by acquiring the shape of the die. Another example of this is nothing but a 1 rupee coin or 2 rupee coin or 5 rupee coin. You can see that is simply it is called as a stamping process. It obtains the shape of the upper die and the lower die. So the coin, the raw material is placed in between the dies and the external force is applied over the die. So it stamps like this. So what will happen? The upper die and lower die, the impression is on the coin. So this is what one of the process. The next process you are seeing here is about the extrusion. So here you can see the third animation at the bottom, how extrusion is done. So there are two types of metal forming. One is hot and another one is cold. Hot means the raw material is heated and it is processed. The force is applied or sent in between the rollers or in passed in between the dies, right? So cold is without the application of heat. That is what the difference between the two metal forming process, hot and the cold, right? So here you are seeing about the extrusion process, right? This example of a day-to-day life example here is the drawing paste from the paste tube. So what we will do is we will take the paste, right? We will flow it on the brush. What will happen? The external force is applied on the paste tube. What will happen? Once the force is applied, the raw paste inside the tube flows out of the mouth. Am I right? It takes the shape of the mouth. That is the best example of this extrusion process. Other than this, the last process is about the drawing. The drawing is nothing but the reducing the diameter of the wire. So that process is called drawing. So you can see here the animation. You can see how the wire material is reduced the diameter. Yes. So the material is passed in between the dies. So what happens is the diameter of the particular material is reduced and it is wounded, right? So this process is called drawing. So this is one of the example of the manufacturing process, right? So forming is one of the example. Likewise, as we discussed already, there are different process, different classifications of manufacturing, right? That is I told you already, molding, right? Then metal forming, right? Then metal joining, machining, additive manufacturing, etc., right? So there are different classifications, right? So let us see about the foundry. So what is a foundry? A foundry is a place where the metals are melt and it is poured in the cavity and it is allowed to cool, right? So it takes all the process together and it is collectively called as the foundry process, right? So here what we do is the raw material in the form of solid are put in a vessel and it is heated, right, by the application of the current or by the application of the coal, right? The heat is applied either by current or through coal. So once the heat is applied, this raw material takes some time to heat, right? So it takes some time to heat and it gets converted from a solid into a liquid form. So this process is called melting. So why it is important, right? So because this forms the mother of the foundry is the mother of the all the components, right? So the components are created from the foundry. The scrap metals or the raw metals or different ingredients are poured in a or placed in a vessel and it is heated, right, according to the required ratio, right? Once it is heated and it is formed into a required shape or the approximate shape, then it is measured to the perfect geometry, precise and accurate measurements, right? So this is very much important in the mechanical engineering. So there are different processes that are carried out in the foundry. So we can see, as I already told you, the first form is the melting process. So the melting process, there the raw materials are placed in a vessel and they are heated, right? So they are heated and it is heated and the solid form of material is converted into a liquid form of material, right? And then the mold is prepared. What do you mean mold? Mold is nothing but the formation of the required shape, right? So we need to form a required shape. For example, in South India we prepare idli, right? So the how the flour is prepared, the flour is prepared in a liquid form, right? The flour, the atta is prepared in a liquid form and it is poured in the cavity, right? Poured in the cavity and it is placed in a vessel and the heat is applied externally. So what will happen? The heat will uh, the the flame will produce heat energy. That heat energy is used to convert the water present in the vessel into a steam. That steam will flow into the pores of the cavity where the it consists of the liquid floor. Am I right? So this steam will convert the liquid floor into a solid idli. Am I right? So this is what the practical scenario that takes place in foundry. Here, instead of floor, we use metal, right? This metal is converted into a solid metal is converted into a liquid metal. That process is called melting. After melting, this mold is prepared, right? This mold is prepared by means of a sand which can withstand a high temperature up to 1800 degrees Celsius and it will not react with the material that is a liquid material, right? So once a cavity is created manually and then it is the molten metal is poured inside the cavity. So then it is allowed to cool according to the room temperature. So after it cools, it forms the liquid into a solid metal, right? Then the mold is removed from the molding sand and then the finished product is processed according to the need. So these are the basic steps that are carried out in the foundry. So once again, you can see the flow chart, right? So the first process of thing is the pattern making. Pattern is nothing but the required shape. For example, if this pen is to be manufactured, this pen to be made as a pattern and it is to be impressed on a sand, like the kids play on a beach, no? Likewise, the sand is impressed with the required shape. This thing is called nothing but called as a pattern, right? So pattern, then sand preparation, then melting is done, then pouring is on the way, then it is allowed to solidify and cool and then it is removed. The final raw material is removed. If required heat treatment is done, then cleaning and finishing, then finally inspection. So these are the broad steps that are carried out